So these are the avenues of research that I have that are natural to me, and that's kind of I call myself an intellectual person, and I don't mean that I'm smart. I don't think I'm terribly smart, but I think first, feel second. That's what I mean. I kind of lead with my brain a little bit. So the research of facts is just information history, and I'm specifically interested in psychology and sociology. And so anytime that I'm like, okay, I'm going to create a world, I'm going to create a character, those are my avenues of research. I use the internet a lot. So I'm going to show you how this research kind of leads to that insight and intimate knowledge of your world, and kind of leads you to the right question. So I'm going to read you something that I wrote because I knew I would not be able to think this up on the fly. So when researching facts, for instance, if I was going to write a story about a soccer team, which I have never participated in sports, I've never played soccer, so it's something that I know absolutely nothing about. I probably wouldn't ever write a story about it, but for example's sake, if I was going to write a story about a soccer team, I'd need to know a lot about facts about soccer, right? So things that I would research might be, how many soccer players are there in my state or my country or just in the world in general? What training do you have to be a soccer player? What are all the pieces of a soccer player's uniform? How do soccer teams make money? What are the rules of playing soccer? How many games are in a season? What is the ultimate goal for a soccer team? What is the ultimate competition? Is it national? Is it international? That kind of thing. So you can just kind of run along that whole thing. I need to know about soccer, right? And the next thing on here is history. So how did soccer get started? Who are the most famous players? How and when were the rules decided upon? How and when were different teams formed? And what are the latest advancements in gear or plays? How has it changed now or in the last couple years as compared to what it was 50 years ago or something like that? I just want to have a full understanding of this subject, right? And in psychology and sociology, what does the psychology of a typical athlete look like? How are soccer players trained mentally? How do athletes deal with stress or injuries? What draws people to soccer? How are soccer teams formed? What is the psychology of leadership? What are traits that make good players for the various positions? And what is the average economic status of a soccer player? And what are common psychological or sociological problems athletes encounter? Right? So it's like, when you embrace research and you're like, okay, we're going to go into this, and you kind of know your avenue of how you're going to approach it and get into it, you can just start with a whole boatload of questions. And can you see how researching to that depth and asking questions like that, you are going to move away from cliche. You're going to move into originality, because you aren't just copying other sports movies and other scenes. They had a scene in a locker room, and they had a scene at a party, and they had the scene where the two teams meet up and have a little bit of a face-off before the big game, right? Those are the cliches. Those are the tropes. You can actually move away from that and actually, okay, I want to have my own understanding. I want to be able to have my own ideas about this subject. What are you trying to communicate? So the next thing on here is research of opinion. And research opinion is really just, what do I think about this subject? And this is specific to me because I'm a theme-based writer. I always start with a theme. I always have. So research of opinion, what do I think? What do I think about this theme, this question that I have? So I recently did the short film that I said was about revenge. And it kind of started with the question, what causes someone who has legitimately wants revenge and has a reason for revenge, what causes them to walk away from that? They have the opportunity right in front of them to take revenge. Why would they walk away? And so that was kind of my question. And so I wrote pages and pages of what I thought about revenge, and what is the antidote to revenge, and what revenge causes, and where does it come from, right? That's what do I think. It's also what do other people think. I read up on the psychology of revenge, on different movies or pieces of art, stories that are about revenge, different characters who struggle with revenge. What have other people already said about this? Where do I agree with them? Where do I disagree with them? How has this idea been portrayed in art and story? Where is kind of the gap that I haven't really seen filled? What is the message that I'm trying to convey? What is it that I'm trying to communicate? And like I said, I'm a theme-based writer, and so this is very, very concrete for me. And I think that a lot of filmmakers and writers are not theme-based like that. You guys start with pictures or an emotion or an experience that you want to have. And so you can apply these kind of ideas of research to that as well, of what is it exactly? What is it that I want to capture? Is it a feeling? If it is a feeling, what feeling is it? And how has it been captured and portrayed before? And what are the pieces of it? And what are the different ways you could look at it? And what leads up to it? And what is the fallout of getting a real grasp on all of the pieces all of the ideas that you're trying to bring in alignment, right? You have to know what the base of it is, and you have to understand the outworking of it in order to actually make a complete story out of it, because the story is where the characters come from, that they go through that experience, or the experience that they have the emotion or the realization of theme that you're trying to go through. And so you have to understand the sides of it, where you are before, where you are after, the implications of it. And that is not intuitive. I think that people think that, oh, I just feel it and so it comes out in my art. And I don't really think that. I think that a master can do that. They can just kind of think it and it just comes out in their art. And maybe I'm describing how I learn, and that's a question for you, is like, how does your intuition work, I guess, is the question. I know that mine works. I have to consciously think through everything. It's not just about, oh, I feel it, and so it will come out in my art. Megan says, you start with a cool idea or a fun or intriguing character, and then I go, how do I make this story worthwhile to read now? AKA theme. Yeah, or it's just, what do you want to say? You have something to say. You have things that you think. You have things that you believe. You have things that you've learned in your life, things that you've been through. And that is what is of value to other people in story, is to experience what you've experienced without actually experiencing it, right? That's what story is. You're going to experience, when you look at some of the more extreme things, it's like you're going to experience heartbreak, but you're not actually going to get your heart broken or have your relationships destroyed, right? You're going to experience extreme cold or starvation, but you're not actually physically going to experience it. You're just going to understand it. This is the value of story and art. And so I think as storytellers and artists, we have to understand what we are trying to communicate first, what our experience is, or whatever is driving your story at the moment, right? So, research of facts, research of opinion, because it's the research and the collection of the research into different ideas and different thoughts that will allow you to actually understand the root of it and in you, so that you can communicate it to other people, and it is of more value that way. So the last one on here is research of self. And I'm pulling a lot of this from Judith Weston's book. She's a director, and she wrote 2 books. One is called Directing Actors, and the other is called The Film Director's Intuition. And I think this stuff is from the Film Director's Intuition, about the research of self. So research of self just means, well, I'll read you what I have because I kind of have to build into it. So research of self can often look like you're not really doing much of anything. You're taking long walks, or doing dishes, or listening to music, or hanging upside down on the back of your couch, or reenacting scenes from your imagination in your backyard. But what is happening is this idea of active imagining, giving yourself time and space to really picture all of the aspects of what you're trying to write. And each time, you know what, I think I do have this is a quote, yes, from the Film Director's Intuition. It says, active imagining is different from idle fantasy. An elementary illustration of the difference might be found when looking through a fashion catalog. I see a beautiful dress on a model and imagine myself looking like the model. That's an idle fantasy. It's different from imagining myself in the dress, which is more work. I mean, literally, it takes more time and effort to imagine the dress on me than to succumb to the instantly gratifying fantasy of imagining that in this dress I will look like the model. Right? And this is a little bit like what I was talking about with motivation and having realistic vision. actually do the work of imagining what reality will be like. And so this active imagining is something that you really have to learn to do as a writer, because I know for me, when I have a spark, it's like I feel like I can see the whole story. Like Noah said, I see the beginning, I see the end, the characters start here and they land there, right? It feels like I have a full understanding. But in reality, I have to actively work through and imagine every piece of the story or every piece of the characters. I have to do the active imagining work. And this is kind of what I'm calling the research of self. So back to that. Sorry, I'm a little out of order for you guys. I hope you can track with this. So with research of self, what is happening is this idea of active imagining, giving yourself time and space to really picture all the aspects of what you're trying to write. And each time you revisit your imagination, you add a little bit more to the edges of your ideas. You make a few more connections, and this creates those lightning bolts of inspiration that you're looking for. However, explained in that quote, you have to be purposeful with this time, lest you fall into just idly fantasizing about things. So active imagining produces results, more ideas, more avenues of emotions, and more thoughts to explore. It's actual work for your brain, and sometimes it takes work to get your brain to focus on that and not get sidetracked, right? So to help maintain that focus, it can be helpful to break down some different avenues of self-research. So that's what's on the screen here. We have memories. What are the memories that are connected to what you're writing? How did those memories impact you? How did they shape the way you view the world? Relive those memories through the lens of active imagining and try to remember physically what it felt like. How do those memories motivate you? And you can find so much good earth to play in when it comes to characters and conflict and emotions when you really dig into your own experiences. And I've found that this active imagining thing is so true. We can feel like we're imagining. We can feel like we're so creative and imagining. We can see all these stories and all these characters, but unless you're actually setting aside the time to do the work, to actually do the investigation into where this idea is coming from, the things that matter to it, why does it matter to you, what is sparking it in your memories, what emotional connections can you find in your memories, all of that, all of those questions, when you dive into them, when you investigate them, actually bring forward so much good earth. Like, how can you have writer's block when you're doing this? There's so much richness to work with when you're really engaged with actively imagining and honestly questioning and investigating all the pieces of what you're trying to do. So, memories, imagination, the realm of wouldn't it be cool if, images, colors, emotions, characters. This feels kind of obvious, like duh, we're writers, we imagine stuff, we imagine stories. But like I'm saying, you have to do the active imagining, setting aside the time and space to explore your imagination. For me, this is right. I have to do this while writing. If I just like sit down and like think, my mental load interrupts. Different ideas for different stories interrupts. I need some focus on, I do kind of like stream of consciousness writing, like this is a question and that might be the answer, which leads to another, like I literally am writing down my thoughts so that I can bring them into the conscious space in the front of my brain instead of in the subconscious space that spark came from. And once, this is kind of like brain dumping, right? Once you get it out of your head onto paper, there's more space to have more ideas, and you can actually get past unoriginal ideas and really get to the meat of what this story is. What am I trying to do? What am I trying to communicate? What is the value here for me? And that will be the value for other people. All right, the last one on here is empathy, which, when talking about empathy, for me, this is more connected to coming up with characters and understanding your characters, having that intimate knowledge of your characters and building realistic characters. Using active imagining to really put yourself into someone else's shoes. That's what empathy really is. And it's not just, I wonder what I would do in that situation, but imagining living the life that the character has lived and the internal dialogue that they would have running in their head, or taking someone that you know that is like your character and trying to understand their motives and desires. When you do this, when you actively imagine your characters in all of their facets and make them a real person, you'll never be out of ideas. Like, how could you run out of ideas? There's character conflict, character growth, there's conflict, because when you're writing compelling conflict as a storyteller, everyone is right, and so you have to be able to step into the shoes fully of all of your characters and understand how they're coming at the conflict from their point of view. And you have to be able to empathize with them in how they feel they're right around the conflict. So this is for building characters, and it goes so much more deeper than just like, this is your character's personality, or these are the ways that they are in conflict with the characters around them or the characters of the world. This is like, how are they in conflict with themselves? What are the memories in the past that's driving them? Like, this is all fun stuff for us as writers, right? If you can make your characters real to you, you're going to be excited to tell their stories, right? You're not going to get stuck. You're not going to get unmotivated, because you have such a wealth of things that you have to say and things that you're trying to communicate, and you have so many questions. Like, when you engage with the process of investigation in order to have that intimate knowledge and insight into your world that Robert McKee was talking about, it's like, anytime that you feel stuck with writer's block, it's like, just disengage with writing and engage with your characters, engage with what it means to you, what you were trying to communicate, what was the original thought here? Did you go astray from it? What is still exciting you about this process, this project? I think that's kind of the end of my research rant. There was 3 types of research there. It was, for me, facts, research of opinion, and then the self-research.